see that the social engineers who troll our almost every show are out in super force. How are you today, David?
I'm very well. It must mean they're getting desperate.
It means something. They're definitely interested in this topic that you brought to my attention some time ago, this concept of Mendenhall's baby. Now, I think we should catch some people up, David, because, just to touch on some of this activity of these social engineers, it's interesting to note that this video began with 3 thumbs down before we even started it. So there's someone who knows that they don't like this topic even before they hear what you have to say about it.
Well, I could understand because that phrase Mendenhall's baby that occurs in the Washington Post in 1979 refers to Christine Marcy, who's probably in the history of the American bureaucracy the most powerful and dangerous person on record. Because back in 1979, when presumably they didn't know that she was going to have a Mendenhall's baby, or some people knew, but some people didn't, she went on in 1984 to found 3 organizations that went to the very heart of the decay in the American government. The first is the database for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The second is the Federal Marshal's prisoner transportation system. And the third is the Department of Justice Asset Forfeiture Fund. So this was a well-equipped woman to wreak havoc on the United States of America right through to 911. And she's had a Mendenhall's baby. Over to you.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, David, because, we do encourage viewers to participate in the process. In fact, that's what Crowdsource the Truth is really all about. We want input from the crowd. It's not about you or I knowing everything and telling everybody about it. It's an interactive process. And so we invite viewers to participate, to provide us with information. Of course, everything that we're doing is sponsored by the viewers. So we couldn't do this without the viewers, but it's not just about asking people to support patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And it's also not simply about letting people know about Reverse CSI Scripts, your website, where they can access all the information that you're posting, as well as the playlist of all of our previous YouTube videos. But it's just very interesting to note at this moment where Nicholas Soames has effectively been ejected from British politics by Boris Johnson. And you've been talking about this Mendenhall episode more than anyone. I haven't heard about it before you mentioned it, but it did bring about this rather curious set of circumstances where you found the definition to this strange term in the Urban Dictionary. Let's give everybody just a quick recap of how this all came about when you first became aware of the Washington Post article about Christine Marcy and how we got to where we are right now, and then we'll talk about some of the latest developments.
All right, but I think I need to run the clock back to who Christine Marcy is.
Sure.
And when I revealed her as a potential threat.
Yeah.
So in May the 1st of 2007, I wrote a brief for Phil McConnell, who's the brother of Christine Marcy, who filed a case in the North Dakota court, naming a number of individuals, I think nearly 100 from memory, as probably responsible for the wrongful deaths of the people on 911. And one of the persons he named was his sister, Christine Marcy. And that was a result because I'd done some research after he told me he had this high-powered bureaucrat in Washington. And my jaw dropped when I found out how dangerous she was. And I gave a brief to him, and he put that into the court. But I suggested to him that he didn't serve anyone because I think this was just a statement. So now, with Christine Marcy exposed potentially exposed, I believe, as a co-conspirator or at least partly responsible for the deaths of 911. This was, let's say, May the 1st of 2007, and I really haven't stopped talking about her ever since. Now, I imagine that what's happened, the people who want to defend or deflect attention away from Christine Marcy, when I discovered, I would say about 18 months ago, this reference to Mendenhall's baby in the article in the Washington Post and the definition in the Urban Dictionary, I thought, well, now is or was, I'd always suspected it, people like Christine Marcy an object for pedophile or sexual entrapment and blackmail, because that's a technique favored by British intelligence, and they've damn near perfected it. Now, fast forward to the present, of course, if we're talking about Mendenhall's baby being conceived by a Brit, we now know that the senior people in the American government are totally involved or targeted by pedophile blackmailers, including Jeffrey Epstein and his pimp, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right.
So what I'm suggesting that our listeners consider is there a pervasive pedophile blackmail ring within the Five Eyes countries? And let me just mention Canada, because the former Prime Minister, there's now an election on, so he's running as a candidate, Liberal candidate, Justin Trudeau, who's obviously, well, he is the son of Pierre Trudeau, who was a noted socialist or communist. Justin Trudeau shared lodgings or roommate at Douglas Lodge in British Columbia, in Vancouver, actually, with a man who would subsequently be convicted as the director of an international pedophile ring.
But let me reel you back in, David, because this is the deep topic that we're going to be getting into later today when our show continues on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. I want to keep you here in the Mendenhall Hall of Fame, because the Mendenhall clue leads to all these other things. And what we have observed is there seems to be a remarkable effort to conceal any investigation into this, Mendenhall word, which really it should be nothing, because we came to this understanding by reading the WashingtonPost.com, which of course did not exist in 1979 when this article was written. And when this article was first shown to me by you, it had several what we called typos. It said Christine Mary had her first chili. People can see that these typos, these obvious typos, have been corrected. The problem that we have with the Washington Post right now is that in this article, in 1979, it said Mendenhall's baby was due in early August. However, in 2019, as of March 25th, the same social engineers we're talking about have contacted the Washington Post and alerted them that you and I are talking about this, and they changed it from Mendenhall's baby to Marcy's baby. Now, you had first noticed this statement about Mendenhall in the Washington Post online. I don't imagine you read this article. You didn't know about Christine Marcy in 1979. So you saw in the article this reference to Mendenhall's baby. And what was the process in your mind, David?
Well, I think then, I don't know when that change was made.
That change was
the original
made
article.
March 25th, 2019, after you and I had discussed it considerably. But when you first saw it, do you remember when that was, that it said Mendenhall?
I would say at least a year before. I mean, there'll be references on Able Danger and so on. But I'd taken a whole line of research, and we talked about it on your show. So it preceded the change in optical character recognition. In fact, the manipulation of news, which is classic 1984. Over to you.
Right. So the optical character recognition is what we had determined was the likely cause of the typos, changing the word Marcy to Mary, changing the word child to chili. These are the types of errors that happen when a computer looks at a scan, and we can even see it in this scan of the microfilm. We can see there are breaks in some of the letters, dots that are not part of the punctuation that could confuse the optical character recognition and change the word child to chili. But how does it, this says Mendenhall, and this was properly recognized and transcribed into the article. It originally on the WashingtonPost.com for all of 2018 and for the first quarter of 2019, it still said Mendenhall, but somebody contacted the Washington Post and had it changed. Then I went and obtained this scan that proved that it did say Mendenhall. I got into a series of phone calls with the people at the Washington Post who have refused to change it. So you saw that written in the Urban Dictionary and you didn't know what it meant. So you looked it up on the internet, and the best thing that you could find was this definition in the Urban Dictionary that said Mendenhall, and here, I've got it right here. We can take a quick look at it. Why don't you read it for us, David, once again, and remind everybody what we thought it meant.
Okay, so you're about to put it up, are you? The definition?
It's up, yeah.
If you get,
Have
okay, I don't see it in my
Sorry,
screen.
It says to mount someone from behind while they are in the fetal position on the ground. After the deed is complete, you roll them over to see the humiliation in their eyes, and this is best accomplished in front of a large audience. And this is Go Pack. So I think that's a Steelers fan, right? Is that the Pack? And it was posted January 25th, 2011. Now, I don't believe you're a fan of American football, are you, David?
Well, no, not particularly. Rugby is my game.
Right. So you weren't watching the AFC Championship in 2010 when the Pittsburgh Steelers played against the New York Jets, and the Pittsburgh Steelers had, I think he's a running back named Rashad Mendenhall or something like that. And see, when you search for Mendenhall on YouTube now, you get quite a lot of our videos. And basically what I'm getting to, David, is that one of these social engineers, a guy who used to hang out and have a little bit of back and forth with Mr. Marsden, he's contacted me. This guy's made a lot of videos about you. None of them are complimentary, and they don't have to be complimentary. We welcome criticism if it's valid, but I had some issues with the way this guy was conducting himself. He's not using his real name. He's bringing up things about you that aren't entirely true. Point of the matter is, Rashad Mendenhall is seen in this video. We'll play it for everybody right here. This is an interesting mystery. So this is a short clip from the AFC Championship, and we can see right here, number 34, Rashad Mendenhall simulates sex with that other player, obviously in an attempt to chide him, humiliate him, whatever it might be. There's a large audience watching the AFC Championship there in the football stadium. But this is bizarre, David. This video was posted on January 23rd, 2011, and 74,000 people. Oh, I didn't realize this. It's unlisted. So how did I even find this? Huh.
Were you sent it by one of these social engineered types?
Well, no. This was posted by, I haven't really looked into this, D Surgeon's CEO, but for someone with 22 subscribers to post a video that gets 74,000 views, that's magic. I'd love to know what this guy did. You know, perhaps it's a very popular game, but I got it from this post on Philly Buzz. I guess people in Philadelphia would definitely be Pittsburgh Steelers fans, but this is posted by the Duke. Now, somehow we had come across a name. You remember who I was talking about? This is the Duke, but we had, who was that guy? Oh yeah, that was from the Urban Dictionary. We have Go Pack posting this one, but that's on January 25th. If you look up Mendenhalling, there's another definition on the Urban Dictionary. This is posted by Baron Shenanigans on January 23rd. Now, these all seem like bizarre fake names that would be used by social engineers. I mean, the question is, to what end are these people doing this, David? There's some strange things about this definition in the dictionary, this video of Rashad Mendenhall simulating humping. But the point is, this guy who was emailing me, telling me that you didn't receive a scholarship and that telling me about women you were dating in 1968, obviously trying to disparage you, but I don't care about what you were doing in 1968. It was within the bounds of the law, and I can't help it that women were madly attracted to you in your younger days. Who am I to criticize that? But the point is, he was trying to say that because this definition came from the football game, everything that you're saying is invalid. What can you say about that?
Well, first of all, it's quite obvious this guy who's, I believe, dry humping a football player at a game in, well, 2011 or whatever, obviously can't be the father of Mendenhall's baby, who was presumably conceived in November of 1978.
Right.
So anyway, when I saw that definition in the Urban Dictionary, not knowing that it was a 2011 definition, the only time I'd ever heard of Mendenhall was in the context of Mendenhall's baby, which is Christine Marcy's daughter, presumably.
Right.
So I go back and I wonder, well, who could be Mendenhalling Christine Marcy in 1978? And then, of course, I end up with a British guy, who would go on to become the Minister of State for the Armed Forces in the United Kingdom from 1994 to 1997, who warned Princess Diana that accidents will happen. And I'm talking about Nicholas Soames. And Nicholas Soames was in Washington in 1978 as the personal aide to Senator Mark Hatfield, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which I understand is the most powerful committee in the United States because that's where the dollars are funneled out through earmarking and the rest of it. So Nicholas Soames, right? And then someone took Nicholas Soames's image, maybe it was you or maybe it was someone else, and did a morph, I don't know the procedures there, into Christine Marcy's face. And I'm not an expert in that area, but the DNA
Jessica Marcy.
Jessica Marcy is identical. So I believe that Nicholas Soames, we can do a DNA or get a blood test eventually, is the father of Jessica Marcy. And I don't mean to say anything unpleasant about Jessica Marcy, but I think Jessica Marcy owes it to herself to ask her mother where her mother thinks this term Mendenhall's baby comes in, and then does a little more work on what Field McConnell thinks of his sister, because Field McConnell and myself did a great deal of research on this woman, and we think she had all the ingredients involved or necessary to carry out some of the most heinous crimes in history, including access to prisoners flying around on Conair. Over to you.
Yeah. So the point basically is, with regard to Mendenhall, even if that urban legend dictionary definition came from something done by Richard Mendenhall in 2011, somehow it triggered a thought process in your mind that led you to the conclusion that Nicholas Soames had raped Christine Marcy, impregnated her, and her child that she had in 1979, who's referenced in that Washington Post article, is Jessica Marcy. I want people to notice Jessica Marcy dyes her hair blonde. It appears to be dark in color based on her eyebrows and the roots of her hair, which would seem to match the hair color of Nicholas Soames, her facial features, and just her overall look. I see a striking family resemblance. The jowls, the shape of her face. We've seen Christine Marcy many times, and actually this guy, this social engineer who's trying to convince me that somehow you dating women in Paris is something I should not, I don't know what he's trying to get at with that, but this guy actually, even shared with me an image of Christine Marcy's husband, Eric Marcy, who I do not think looks very much like his alleged daughter. We never know, but she certainly looks a lot more like Nicholas Soames to me than she does Eric Marcy. What do you think about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that leads you to one legitimate question, and that's what these social engineers ought to be doing, is to ask, why and where did the word Mendenhall come from if it wasn't from the dry humping at the 2011 game with the Pittsburgh Steelers? And so I've found a couple of sources, potential sources, for Mendenhall that might relate to Mendenhall's baby and the possible rape of Christine Marcy in November of 1978. One is the Mendenhall prison in Simpson County in Mississippi, which apparently is a notorious jail for exchanging between gangs, sexual and, which are obviously rape because they're, same sex in each of the jails, and drug favors. And there's been a tremendous difficulty in protecting the prisoners who have certain rights when they go into a prison in Mississippi from being exploited and extorted by internal gangs. The other source of the name Mendenhall, which I find very interesting, is Thomas Mendenhall, and we see him on the front page of the image that you introduced this part of the show with. And Thomas Mendenhall was working as a professor of history at the United States Naval War College. And this was, I think, around 51, 52. And what the US Naval War College does, it does a lot of strategic wargaming to teach people various opportunities and vulnerabilities to be recognized in the enemy that might give an advantage to, well, the United States of America if it ever has to go to war with anyone. What fascinates me is a graduate or a teacher of war game strategy or geopolitical strategy at the United States Naval War College, where this guy Thomas Mendenhall
Thomas
taught
Barnett,
on
right?
history.
Oh, sorry.
Is Thomas Barnett,
right?
And Thomas Barnett has said of the events of 9/11, where he was a regular consultant and visitor to Cantor Fitzgerald on the 101st floor at the top of the North Tower, where Cantor Fitzgerald lost 658 people, murdered, in my opinion, not some tragic accident because they dropped the building around them. But he described the events of 9/11, in particular, the people jumping out of the North Tower, as the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history, which enrages me. So the social engineers can take that to the bank, because I believe there was the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history, staged by people with very limited ability to turn that into a real event, unless the public opinion was manipulated into believing that a guy in a cave in Afghanistan had the capability of doing it.
Now,
So
you've
what
just
I've been
hit the
doing
important
recently,
topic, David. The public opinion being manipulated. Now, we still have a lot to unpack with this Mendenhall story, so we might go a little bit longer here in our YouTube preview than we normally do, but our regular viewers are going to know that after this, we're going to really dig into the main topic today on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And I think we need a few more minutes on this, David, so perhaps we'll begin at 2 p.m. Eastern on Patreon. And I really hope that people will join us, because every time you and I are the focus of these social engineering attacks, every time I wake up and turn on the computer and look at YouTube and see that new videos about really important topics like lies in the news and who attacked Benghazi and what government bureaucrats might be involved in a supranational fraternity that's utilizing the nexus of corporations and governments and media to perpetrate some of the most horrendous crimes in the history of mankind, including 9/11. I think it's important that we expose these things, and we're not able to do that without the support of the audience. So it is extremely important that people go not only to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, but also to your site, David, patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards. So there remains a mystery as to where this term Mendenhall came from and as to why there's so much attention on that video of Richard Mendenhall doing that simulated humping there, and we don't have an explanation for that. You mentioned that this jail is located in Mendenhall, Mississippi. I guess
Mendenhall is the jail in Simpson County in Mississippi.
That's the name of it.
With a long record of inter-gang rape and sexual exchange and so on. And I imagine that term might come into or through the jail out into the wider community, maybe including football players, etc., etc., and eventually percolate through to the Urban Dictionary. But the point is, what I'm basically saying is Mendenhalling precedes the appearance of that article in the Urban Dictionary, or that reference. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Now, so that's one source of the term, potential source of the term Mendenhall. The other is this guy, Thomas Mendenhall, at the United States Naval War College, I think around 51 or 52, followed by there's a guy called John Brewster Hattendorf. I'm not changing the subject here, but this is fascinating because the Ernest King Professor of Maritime History at the United States Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, was historically for a period of 2 years. Now, this guy, John Hattendorf, was the Professor of Maritime History, the Ernest King, from 1984 to 2016, through the events of 9/11 and going back to 1984. Now, let me just imagine myself going to the United States Naval War College and playing war games under the tutelage of either Thomas Mendenhall or John Brewster Hattendorf. One of the things that the lesson that would have been learnt from World War II is, with a bit of shock and awe and a couple of well-placed bombs, you can get the enemy to surrender. So at Nagasaki and Hiroshima, a little group of decision makers, including, I believe, Victor Rothschild and Winston Churchill, who, if we're right about this chain of DNA, would be the great-grandfather of Jessica Marcy. I mean, you know, apologies to all, but that would be the DNA, which is kind of unforgiving. But one of the things you'd learn as a student at the US Naval War College is if you can manipulate public perceptions or the internal integrity of the enemy, so it starts to basically dissolve, betray their friends, etc., etc. One of the mechanisms for that would be pedophile entrapment and blackmail, and then put a couple of bombs at the right place and the right time. Japan surrendered, if I understand correctly, and the war was over. Now, what happened on 9/11 at the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center? Jason, it occurred to me this morning as I was thinking about the show we would have today. On 9/11, the United States Navy surrendered. Surrendered to whom? Vitally important question. What do I mean by surrender? I mean that something went across the Pentagon lawn at 500 miles an hour, 15 feet elevation, punched a tunnel through 8 walls of the Pentagon into the inner courtyard, and killed Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer of the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center, and 125 of his colleagues. Effectively, the American military, at least as far as the Navy is concerned, was decapitated. So what did the Navy do to investigate what was a crime? It wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a criminal attack with a mass casualty consequence. Well, they evidently decided to change, or George Bush decided to change the Secretary of the Navy out, Gordon England, to a new man who's a former Marine, a Marine Corps vet, called Colin McMillan. Colin McMillan committed suicide. One of those bizarre sounding suicides that smells to me like 2 Clinton bullets in the back of the head.
David, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're going to go to those details that this leads to on our Patreon show. I want to keep you focused on this social engineering play having to do with the Mendenhall thing, because it is a mystery, and I'm not going to deny what this listener said. Obviously, there was a tremendous amount of social media activity surrounding this activity or this action by Rashad Mendenhall on January 23rd, 2011. That's when these videos were posted, prompted someone to make a post on the Urban Dictionary. It just seems strange. And I'm not able to find the other post, but there was another post of this on January 23rd. Perhaps people were so fascinated by it that they felt that they needed to post it on YouTube, they needed to put it in the Urban Dictionary. But to me, it just reeks of an inject of some kind of news. Someone specifically wanted this to go there. And if we are to believe that this process of steganographic messaging in newspapers has existed at least as far back as 1979, Quinn Michaels has identified steganographic messaging in a children's book called My Friend Mr. Leakey that was written in 1937. Certainly if it's a procedure that's been around for almost 100 years, it's not just, plop a word in the newspaper and leave it at that. I would imagine there are several measures, countermeasures, things that they do to maintain the secrecy of this type of messaging. I can't say what would have motivated Rashad Mendenhall to do that. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Perhaps he knew that this term had some meaning. I mean, if it's his name, anyone who meets him and might know about it could perhaps mention it to him, or perhaps someone told him to do it. I don't know if we'll ever know.
Oh, no. Let me just jump in there. So as we know now, the British company Serco, through the Patent Office, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and work with the United States, United Kingdom Cabinet Office, is in the business of resilience training.
Right.
Where they inject news and media plays
right.
into government-controlled networks in order to create public perceptions.
Right.
And train government employees or former government employees, right, on how to handle the media. Now, spot fixing, I don't know if that's a term familiar to the audience, but spot fixing is one way of gaming the result of a match, like a football match, where, for example, someone kicks the ball in rugby, you kick the ball into touch 10 minutes after the beginning of the game, and people are placing bets on when the ball is kicked into a touch, and the person who predicts 10 minutes scoops the pot. But that doesn't change necessarily the result of the game. So you can go and access a given player in a football game or whatever and say, kick the ball into the touch, or, tackle some guy, or go and hump that individual in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So for all I know, I mean, basically spot fixing is around the world. There are countries where apparently it's rife, like in India. And of course, spot fixing would be an opportunity for sportsbook bettors of the type that originated with Charles McNeil in Chicago in the 1930s. So organized crime and spot fixing permeates sports in the United States and, for all I know, in Canada and in the UK.
And
so
to
I
be
think
clear,
the term
sorry to
Mendenhall
interrupt, David. To be clear, we're not accusing Rashad Mendenhall of being involved with organized crime or doing anything other than playing football. While we're talking, however, I did find this clip, which I haven't even listened to or watched yet. Interesting to note that, this is coming from Sport-Light channel, also not that many subscribers, but, 10 times as many subscribers as the first clip with Mr. Mendenhall in it. This one only has 13,000 views, and this is saying that Rashad Mendenhall is retiring because, according to Rashad Mendenhall, he's so tired with this industry. I just want to play football. Now, he retired at a very young age, I think 26. So obviously something was going on in the NFL that displeased Rashad Mendenhall, and he left. I don't know if we'll ever get any input from Mr. Mendenhall, but David, it just seems to me that as these social engineers try to draw our attention away from these things, they are drawing attention to these things. If they hadn't changed the Washington Post, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But now the fact that they have encouraged the WashingtonPost.com to change this article from what it originally said in 1979, where it originally told us about Mendenhall's baby being due in August, they've changed it to Marcy's baby. This now becomes the most conspicuous clue in this entire matter, because why does the Washington Post refuse in 2019 in September to change it back to what it actually said in 1979? They have flatly refused. I've even sent them a legal demand, and they're ignoring it.
Well, let's go back to the owner of the Washington Post, which is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. And Amazon specializes in the area of big data, cloud data, rapid search, and artificial intelligence. And I suggest, and you and I, we've discussed that at length, Amazon and the the shareholders of Serco, 10 of whom are the biggest institutional shareholders of Amazon, are the greatest manipulators or potential manipulators of public perceptions the world has ever seen. Right? So if Amazon wanted to clear that concept of a Mendenhall baby and conceal maybe the story behind it, the backstory, which might influence senior civil servants or public servants in the United States, I think that's possibly a reason why that change hasn't been made back. Jeff Bezos has told them, you stick with that, we'll go with Marcy's baby and let Jason Goodman do what he can. Remember, Jeff Bezos was value, his personal assets at $100 billion, so he's got more money than you has, Jason.
Right. Well, it's very interesting about this Mendenhall jail that you found, the Mendenhall Police Department. There's only 18 officers in the Mendenhall Police Department, so I don't know anything about that. But, I mean, again, we've spoken about this concept of chatter and all that sort of stuff, and it just seems like the social engineers got very, very worked up when you and I started talking about this Mendenhall baby. And frankly, the Urban Dictionary Mendenhall definition no longer really even matters at all, because even if this was created in 2011, and even if you looked at it and mistakenly took this definition to lead you to Nicholas Soames, what's the difference? You've arrived at Nicholas Soames, and now we need to pose a question to him.
Yes, and I'd just like to say, if anyone wants to underestimate the level of evil, corruption, and intimidation in the American jail system, let me remind them of the behavior of a probable target for Epstein's blackmail operations, Bill Clinton, right? Because Bill Clinton, when he was governor of Arkansas, presided over, if that's the right word, the tainted blood scam in the Arkansas prison system, where they were paying prisoners $7 a pint to give blood, sending it up to an outfit called Connaught Enterprise in Montreal to be processed, and basically driving the Hep C and AIDS virus around the world. I mean, this was a massive, massive crime by a favorite for certain people in the United States, under the jurisdiction of Bill Clinton. Over to you.
Well, and so each of these powerful people that you're talking about could conceivably, through a law firm, through a public relations firm, a cybersecurity firm, there's a multitude of ways in which these people could employ social engineers to do these things. You know, the other thing that's interesting about this Urban Dictionary entry, this Baron Shenanigans. I mean, the name Baron Shenanigans, it seems like a fake name. This is the only post this person has done on Urban Dictionary. And it just seems so deliberately focused on Mendenhall and the word. Like, why was there all this attention on this activity on January 23rd, 2011? It just seems really bizarre to me, David, and we're going to continue to look into these social engineering plays, these social media plays that, you know, cross over into mainstream media and attempt to manipulate people's perception with fake news injects. So we appreciate the input from that viewer who provided it, but I don't think it's valid. It just reeks of him being a social engineer who perhaps is taking over where our friend Kevin Marsden left off. Kevin Marsden was an obvious troll, called the Washington Post and told a number of lies, and when I received that message that he left with the Washington Post, he very quickly disappeared from the internet. It's interesting, wasn't it?
Oh, totally. And we have this Tom Thumb, whoever that identity is. Could they be one and the same?
The voice sounds different, but I mean, they're both British. They're both operating in foreign countries that are not England. The question that it raises in my mind, David, is there a social engineering equivalent of the Gladio operation, where these English-speaking internet trolls are in various countries where they can sling barbs at you and they can sling barbs at me, and they can't be named as co-defendants in lawsuits as people like Dean Fougere might be about to be experiencing, because he's exhibiting his ignorance all over the place and leaving loads of evidence of him conspiring with these social engineers? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. And now you're going back into World War II and the Special Operations Executive, right, which had 13,400 agents, 10,000 men, 3,400 women. When that was disbanded in May of, I don't know, 1946, these people needed day jobs, right? And I think they have joined probably the most powerful operator of social networks, which is this British company, Serco, where its shareholders are the controlling shareholders in Amazon. See, we're up against it, right? Because that is to say, if we want the truth, Jason, and we want to help our listeners find the truth, we're up against the greatest conspiracy the world has ever seen, sort of quote of Edgar Hoover. Over to you.
Yeah. And it's really important, David. We can see the social engineers trying to suppress the spread of this video, coming in here with thumbs down before the thing ever played. We've got 194 people watching us on YouTube right now. If those people like what we're talking about, I would ask each of them to hit the thumbs up, email this video to just one person if you can. And if you're not already a sponsor, please get on to patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards. Patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's the best way you can support David and myself. It's the best way you can support this kind of information. And we are exposing these social engineering trolls, David. We'll be back in just under 20 minutes on Patreon with our subscriber exclusive show, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you, David, for helping me explore this ongoing social engineering project that grows stranger every day.
And the Mendenhall Hall of Fame.
The Mendenhall Hall of Fame. I'll see you on Patreon, David. See everybody there. Thanks for watching.